Babysitters of Reddit, what's the craziest thing that's ever happened to you while taking care of someone else's kid? I was babysitting an 8-year-old who got pee because I wouldn't let her eat a crap ton of candy at midnight when she was supposed to be in bed, so she sat on the kitchen floor and urinated. I made her clean it up. I usually take care of 3 siblings. The younger ones, a girl and a boy who are twins and 9 years old, usually ask me the strangest questions. One day, the boy turned to me and asked me if I shaved my legs. I said that yes, I do. Then, the girl asked me if I shaved my pubic hair. I was so surprised with the question that before answering the little boy just tells me that their mom doesn't do it. But he continues she has her legs shaved because my dad does it for her when they take showers together. Not too strange, but in the end of the night it was a bit weird looking at their parents' faces when they arrived. Kids say the darndest things. Gave a 4-year-old a bath. Halfway through, she pulls a small spoon out of her fanny. She said she'd put it up there earlier. I asked if she had anything else inside her. She said no. Continued with bath. I haven't babysat in a while, but when I was a teenager I watched 2 kids up the street. The mother was single and had another single friend with 2 kids, so I usually watched them all. I knew they went out to party, which was fine because they'd come home drunk and pay me more than I expected. What I didn't know is how much they partied. One evening I went upstairs to get money for pizza. I found both moms in the bathroom snorting coke. The worst thing was when they offered me some, despite the fact that A, I was about to spend the night watching their young children, and B, I was only 14 or 15 at the time. I babysat a little boy who had severe emotional problems. One time he ran away while I was upstairs playing with his sister. He ran away to the park down the block, climbed a tree and refused to come down because no one loved him. I was young and didn't think about calling the police or anything. I just sat at the bottom of the tree and literally talked him down. I convinced him that I loved him and wanted him to come home. His siblings also helped me by saying they loved him also. It was so scary. That was probably better for him than calling the cops. When I was 13 I got a job babysitting for my neighbors. They had 2 little girls that were just the easiest kids to look after. The mom and dad were super nice people. Dad was a nurse that worked mainly nights and mom worked from home and would ask me over Friday nights so she could go out and have some downtime. I quickly found out though that she was seeing other men. The first night I went over there the mom informed me she would be home no later than midnight. Well, 4 AM rolled around and I'm woken up by noise out on the porch and see her hastily kissing another man and shooing him off. She apologizes for being late, pays me, was $5 short, and I go home to my mom who's peeved that she kept me so late. The same thing happened 2 more times. She'd promised to be home at midnight and come home at 3 or 4 in the morning. Every time with a different guy, and every time would stiff me a little of what I earned. My mom put a stop to it and called her out on cheating on her husband. They ended up getting divorced not long after that. I babysat regularly as a teen. One night it was business as usual. I had just laid the kids down for bed until I hear crying in the bathroom. Go in and the little one had a poop string hanging out of his bottom. I didn't want to pull it in case it was wrapped around something, so I'm trying to keep this kid calm and call his parents. They don't answer. I call over and over with this kid freaking out. I call my mom who calmed me down, took their number, and then chain called them until she got a hold of them. They rushed home and took him to the ER. Definitely my weirdest night. The string came out fine. BTW. Apparently the kid liked yarn a lot. When I was a teenager I was babysitting for a family whose dog had just been hit by a car and had a broken leg. There was one kid, a 2-year-old little girl. I had been asked to take the dog out to pee a few times that night. He had to be leash walked. So while the little girl was happily watching TV on her parents' bed, I took the dog out to the front yard. The people neglected to tell me that their front door locked on its own when it closed. I've never, ever seen a door on a house do that. So when I turn to go back in, I'm locked out with a 2-year-old alone in the house. I go across the street to the neighbor. I think they mentioned that neighbor had a spare key if I ever needed one. No answer. I go over to the window where I can see the kid from and try to instruct her to open the door. She goes to the front door and from the window alongside the door I'm pointing and saying open the door, go on. Open the door and she's not getting it. She breaks down crying hysterically because she doesn't know why I'm not coming back in. Then runs back to her parents' bed to continue sobbing. I felt horrible. The next door neighbor notices what's going on and asks what's up. He was kind of a shady guy. He was the last guy in the neighborhood to not sell his property for flipping. It was a well-off neighborhood and he had the last tiny brick bungalow among giant ray builds. He had a lovely unmowed lawn growing around an old rusty car up on blocks. Nice guy though. He said, "Oh, I can break in for you. Let me get my tool." So he proceeds to go up on the roof and completely remove their skylight, one of those plexi bubble type ones, and drop himself down into the house. Luckily the little girl had fallen asleep on her parents' bed by that point. When the parents came home they felt awful for not telling me about the door, and I had to tell them they should get their skylight checked for leaks. The neighbor across the street later told me she does have their spare key and was home that night and heard me ringing her doorbell, but she had just had a bath and was in her bathrobe and didn't feel like answering. She felt pretty bad about that. When was 10 to probably 13 or 14, I babysat for a weird family in my town. They had 3 daughters who were super awesome and we always had a blast. When I started the youngest was 2 weeks old. It turned into me babysitting for them more than their parents were home or I was at my own home. Anyways, the parents are into weird stuff. One of the things they liked to do was for any major decisions they needed to make they would get out a sinker attached to a string and ask it questions. If it swung a certain way it meant yes and if it went the other way it meant no. Well anyway, I've been watching these girls for a couple years and one night the mother asks where the father and I go when he takes me home. I tell her that he takes me home right away. Well, she says that it takes him 2 or 3 hours before he gets back. Obviously I'm stunned at what she's insinuating. But they pay okay and I always knew they were crazy anyway. About a week after this, she tells me that I can no longer watch the kids because her sinker told her that the husband and I were having an affair. We weren't. I was 12 for frick's sake and he was an ugly 37-year-old. I was 12 and babysitting 2 kids across the street for the night. My parents were home and even brought dinner by, so I felt pretty safe. Mother of the 2 children goes to leave and says she'll be home from nights early morning. Feel free to sleep to her bed. I ask about husband. She said he's home soon before her, but go ahead and sleep in their bed. I got that weird gut feeling something was off and after putting kids to bed I curled up on the couch and tried to sleep. The parents came home sometime between 3-4 and I could hear them in the kitchen commenting on how I was on the couch and not asleep in their bed as they had hoped. Should they wake me, carry me upstairs? No, just leave her. I never said anything to my parents and avoided watching their kids for the next few years. The second and last time I babysat for them was 3 years later, which ended in me calling the parents home and leaving the house as their 7-year-old son had a fishing knife and a whip. Gifts from grandpa. He was threatening me with not asleep in their bed as they had hoped. Creep. Yuck. When I was 16 I babysat 2 little boys every day from 6 AM to 6 PM for the summer. But they had a single mom who was super cool and let me take the boys to the beach, pool, boardwalk, whatever. One day when I got to work, she informed me that her new boyfriend, who I never met or heard her talk about, was going to stay home all day BC he was sick. Not sure why I had to be there too, but I wanted the pay and figured maybe he was too sick to watch the boys. About lunchtime I fed the boys and we walked to the community pool. We were there for a while and came back to the boyfriend watching TV in the living room. This being the first time meeting the boyfriend, I introduced myself and sent the boys upstairs to change shower. As soon as the boys left the room, the boyfriend asked me to take my cover up and bathing suit off. Being young and naive, I laughed and said something stupid like, haha what? Well, he became more persistent at that point. I grabbed my stuff and told him I was leaving, calling the police and the boy's mother. Looking back, I probably should have taken the boys, but I was freaked out and not thinking. I left and never looked back. The police came and talked to me, but when they got to the house the mom was there and he had left. The mom never believed me and didn't pay me for the week. She accused me several times of making it up to get out of work. Why she would believe that dirtball she just met over her babysitter of several months is beyond me. I had a horrible heart-stopping moment when babysitting my neighbor's children. I must have been about 16, and the kids were 7, 5, and 3. We were playing the hide the button game, and the youngest had gone into the open plan dining room, slightly out of my eyesight, and clambered on top of the fire guard. The fire was not on as it was summertime, but as she grabbed the marble of the fireplace, the whole fireplace came out of the wall and crashed heavily to the floor. It was obviously not secured properly and was extremely dangerous. Now, the 3-year-old kid was crying her eyes out, and to this day I have no idea how she came through with only a scraped knee. That thing should have killed her, it was so heavy. I could not lift it back up myself, so I enlisted the help of my brother who was around the corner. Cue shaky phone call to the parents. Your fireplace came off the wall and nearly crushed Holly. She's okay but your fireplace isn't. Their response? Oh, we knew it wasn't fixed on properly. It hasn't been for 10 years. It's on our to-do list. Stupid parents. There were these 2 girls that I babysat for a few months trying to make ends meet. The older one, as far as I could tell, was super nice but could never really stand up for herself. The younger sister, about 7, was evil. The final straw for me was had over a remote control. I went to the bathroom and as soon as I sat down I heard a sickening fleshy thump followed by gasping. I ran into the room and the older sister was on the floor with silent tears streaming down her face and the young one laughing at her. The little one looked at me and said, "Look what I did. I kicked sister. I'm in charge of TV now," and giggled, waving the remote control around. I sent her to her room and helped the older sister up. She asked me to not get her sister in trouble because it happened all the time and she got attacked more if she got in trouble. When I confronted the mom about it, she said, "Oh, that's just how she is. She's so spirited, how her just ignore it." That raises serious red flags about abuse within the home. A parent's failure to correct or stop significant abuse among siblings could constitute neglect or as a form of abuse if it is likely to cause lasting damage to the child. Years ago I was babysitting 2 kids, a boy and a girl who were around 3 and 5 years old. They were both lovely and exceptionally well behaved, so I always enjoyed looking after them. One night, after putting them both to bed half an hour after their bedtime, I settled down to enjoy some QI. Some time had passed when I heard a loud thunk coming from upstairs, so I went to investigate. The layout of the 2nd floor in the house is such that when you reach the top of the stairs and turn right, you are facing down the hallway. At the end of this hallway is the door to the girl's room, and her bed is placed so that it faces the door. As I reached the top of the stairs, I turned to face down the hall and was met with the sight of the little girl sat bolt upright, eyes open, staring blankly out of the door towards me. For a while, neither of us moved until she lay back down again, still keeping her entire upper body completely rigid. She was fast asleep when I reached her to check. Never did find what made the noise, though. I don't like this one. While babysitting 3 kids, ages 4, 8, and 9, the 8-year-old decides to throw a steak knife in the air. The knife hits me in the forehead. It drew a little blood, so I went to look for napkins. Found the mom's lab, called my mom and she took care of the rest. The boy I was babysitting didn't want to go to bed, so he got mad and hid in the dryer while I was reading his sister a bedtime story. I freaked out until I found him and got him to go to sleep, and I didn't tell his mother because I thought she'd think I was a bad babysitter. Turns out I accidentally prisoner's dilemmaed him, because he wound up confessing to his mom the next morning in tears. My mom signed me up for a babysitting job. A family from our church with 4 kids, 3-year-old girl and her 3 brothers, probably 5, 8 and 9 years old. The older brothers were little suckers. We were all in the basement playing NES. Sweet gig so far, when the 2 older brothers and the sister ran upstairs. I was not a good babysitter. I'm a dude playing NES. Suddenly there is a really loud rumbling noise from the stairs, which are just around the corner out of my view, when this little girl goes flying into view at a 100 mph and slams head first into the side of the couch. The little suckers had convinced her to climb inside a cooler and slide down the stairs. The cooler didn't slide. It tumbled and this little girl got her butt kicked by it. She was fairly well rug burnt but otherwise okay. I was not asked back. When I was a young teenager, maybe 14-15, I agreed to babysit a family every Friday night. I loved those kids, and I made pretty good money doing it. It started off great, but as time went on it continued to get worse and worse. The parents were drunks, and they often forgot to pay me or would give me checks that were completely illegible, not signed, or even low payments. Once I got paid $3.54 for 11 hours of work, my dad would drag me back there Saturday mornings each time it happened and stand behind me while I asked for my payment. Another time the husband had driven me home drunk and was pulled over and given a DUI less than a block away from dropping me off. So instead of allowing them to drive me home, my parents told me to either call them to come get me or to take my bike and ride it home at the end of the night. The last straw for my parents was one Friday night when this couple came home completely blasted drunk and had brought a few friends home. The women came into the house and ran upstairs making tons of noise. I wasn't sure if they knew I was even there. They came running back down the stairs like a couple of children racing to the bottom of the staircase wearing only bikini bottoms. I stood there in the living room while they rifled through the fridge and cupboards grabbing anything they could eat, then running outside to meet the men who were standing on the patio getting the hot tub running and warmed up. And then they stripped, and in front of my virgin, never seeing any kind of carnal interaction, 14-year-old eyes, I watched as an OJ played out. Not knowing what to do, I called my house and my dad came to pick me up. As his vehicle's lights lit up the driveway, the couple stopped having their foursome and the mother of the children I was babysitting put a towel around herself and came running into the house apologizing and telling me she had forgotten I was there. My dad stood behind me while he demanded my payment. When I got the check he told them to never call me again. Got paid $185 though, so that was pretty sweet. TLDR. Babysat for a family during my early teenage years. Parents were drunks. My very last night of babysitting for them, they had an OJ in the hot tub while I was sitting there waiting for a ride home. My dad would drag me back there Saturday mornings each time it happened and stand behind me while I asked for my payment. That part, teaching you to stand up for yourself, and the rest of it, you have a really great dad. About 10 years ago I was babysitting for a family I had met through the Special Olympics. The two girls were aged 13 and 5, and the older one was the mentally challenged one. On this particular evening, the older one was upstairs and the younger one was downstairs with me. The younger one wanted to go upstairs to see what her sister was doing and I told her to go ahead. About 5 minutes later I hear the younger one coming downstairs yelling, "Miss Pink Yoshi 1989. I want a snack," so I go to meet her in the kitchen. Well, the next thing I know she's falling down the stairs face first and she lands on her arm. I run over to her asking her if she's okay, and she stands up and says her arm feels funny. Her right arm is clearly broken and shaped like the letter S and wobbling like it's made out of jello. Oh frick, what do? I tell her to sit down and not touch anything while I call her parents, who were luckily headed home already at the time. So 10 minutes later her parents get home and take her to the hospital where it turns out she broke her arm in 2 places. I felt so terrible because I should have gone upstairs with her and walked her back downstairs in the first place. To make matters worse, the older one, who we will remember as mentally challenged, still to this day when they see me has to say, "Hey Miss Pink Yoshi 1989. Remember when Lil sister broke her arm?" Yes, I remember, and I'll never forget. I used to babysit and I tended to land the jobs with the out of control 4+ kids, so I have many stories. 5-year-old eating dog poop, kids rubbing their butts over everything, dangling out 2nd story windows. Okay, just last month my 1-year-old ate dog poop. He threw it up though, then slipped in his throw up. Only then did he start crying. It wasn't me, but my uncle. He was babysitting my brother and I for the day, so he took us over to the park. While we were there, I broke 2 fingers falling off a swing and my brother fell and smashed his nose. Never allowed unsupervised access to this again. Haha. Something like this happened to me. I was visiting my aunt and decided to ride a scooter thing down a steep hill. I started kindergarten a week later with a black eye, 10 stitches, and some heavy bruising. One of the children I babysat, who was about 5 years old, spent at least a full hour telling me about his wife and infant son. He was completely serious and remarkably consistent in the details of the story. Another child, who was about 6 or 7, old enough to be going to the elementary school nearby, couldn't wipe her own butt. Her parents usually did it. I didn't wipe my own butt till I was 8, at least willingly. I babysat for 2 boys. More or less I was helping out their mother who was a single mom and needed the help. They were 8 and 10. I loved the little one, but the older child was a handful and he wasn't the one with ADHD. Their father was from rural Greece now that I remember, and I guess he was raised to believe that the eldest boy was the most important. But because the youngest was the youngest child, and B, had ADHD which caused some learning difficulties, he was more or less considered retarded and worth no more than yesterday's newspaper. I hated getting them back after a weekend with their dad. It'd turn into the 10-YO severely needing a reality check while I worked on bringing the 8-YO out of his shell and let him know that he was indeed loved, especially by his mother who gave them both her love and commitment. However, one day, the 10-YO had an absolute cow because, despite having his turn on the PlayStation, decided he wanted another one, and when his younger brother said no, it's still his turn. The 10-YO chased the 8-YO around the house with a butcher's knife and I had to fricking wrestle it out of his hand. I called their mom that night and said that she had better find another sitter. Basically getting $2 an hour wasn't worth it. I babysat for a family with 5 children for quite some time. The youngest 2 were 5-year-old twins, one of which had a recurring form of Hodgkin's lymphoma. Their mother and I switched off about once a week so she could see the other children and I would stay with the one who was quarantined to her grandmother's house. They kept this house completely immaculate so she wasn't exposed to anything dangerous. Both houses were in a small town and everyone knew the family's situation. One day, at the neighborhood pool, I received a call that the youngest had been transferred to the hospital and we needed to leave immediately to visit her. I quickly told all of the kids why we needed to pack up and go, but her twin wasn't having it. These kids had been through a lot and her twin never knew how to handle the situation. He often lashed out for lack of understanding. He refused to leave the pool and began to scream. After all the other kids pleading for him to let us go, he got out of the pool and pushed me, yelling, "Why can't she just die already? I just want to swim." Everyone turned to witness the scene as the other local parents tried their best to help the situation. Everyone knew we just had to let the situation ride, but he continued, "We always do what she wants. I just want her to die so I can play." The other 3 kids are now crying. A friend's parent had to have her husband carry the kid, kicking and screaming, to our car and place the seatbelt on him so we could visit his sister in case it was the end. The poor husband had scratches all over his face but was so kind and understanding. She's currently in remission. He's going to some therapy. TLDR. Cancerous 5-year-old's twin begs that she would just die already because he wanted to stay at the pool. You know, I don't blame him. It was probably about time for him to pop like that and he probably needed to have that sort of outburst away from his parents. The whole thing sounds incredibly stressful. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.